Hi, this is Rebecca from Reading ID. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be wrapping up the books that I read in January. Should probably pull up that tab. So in January I read 7 books, and the first 2 I'm going to be talking about are in sort of this new segment where I decided to read books recommended by one of my favorite authors. And then after that I have a nonfiction anthology to talk about. And finally, I'll have 4 middle grade graphic novels to talk about. So I'm not going to bother to put timestamps in, but you can skip through the video if there are different aspects that interest you. So I discovered that in 2019, I was really loving books written by KJ Charles. I'd read from her before, but I just kept coming back to her. And one thing that I love about her beyond her own books is that she is an amazing recommender of books. She's very active on Goodreads, and she just does a really great job at getting to the heart of what makes a book worth picking up. So she had a great post wrapping up her own reading in 2019 and recommending some of her most read and most loved authors, and I will definitely link that down below. And she champions a diverse array of authors, especially within the field of romance publishing. Okay, so the first one in that category is Sword Dance by A.J. Demas. And even if I didn't read any other of KJ Charles's recommended books, I knew that I was going to pick up and probably love this one. Sword play, sword fighting is one of my all-time favorite elements of a book, and I should probably just do a whole video on that at some point. Okay, this is KJ Charles's pitch for this book. A.J. Demas is one of my favorite historical romancers for her delightful alt-ancient Mediterranean queer stories. Sword Dance has a house party, a sinister plot, a spy, a soldier, a lovely romance, and a Mickey take of Greek philosophers, a pleasure. By Mickey take, she means a takedown of Greek philosophers. And that's just one of the sort of very smart elements of this book. Yeah, I super enjoyed it. It centers marginalized people in the ancient world, which I don't usually see. And we follow this experienced military man who's kind of recovering from wartime injuries and trying to find his purpose in life. And so here's the setup. So he goes to negotiate a contract for fish sauce with an old friend of his who is a queer woman, and she's set up this household of mostly women. His romantic interest is this genderqueer visitor to the house who is an immigrant, essentially, and he's also an emancipated slave. Yes, this book does actually address slavery in the ancient world, which you almost never see. And it's still a pretty light-hearted read. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'll pick up another one from this author. Okay, are you ready? The second book that I read, recommended by KJ Charles, is called Grumpy Fake Boyfriend by Jackie Lau. So KJ Charles wrote that her second most read author in 2019 was Jackie Lau. She read 6 books by this author. She describes them as modern, diverse, Canada-set rom-coms, mostly with lots of family. Try Grumpy Fake Boyfriend, which is one of the great titles of our times. So obviously I had to pick that one up. I was not sure what I would think of it. It is a fake relationship trope, and it really grew on me. I did enjoy the Canada-ness of it. It's literally set over the long, Canada Day weekend, and the woman in the story, I never remember anyone's names in romances, guys. The woman in the story is going away with some mutual friends, but one of them is an ex, and she would really like to have some company on this trip, and so her brother sets her up with his friend, who is a very relatable character. He's an introvert. He's a science fiction author himself. I think the realism of him as an introvert who is kind of discovering that, he does need to push his boundaries and, let people into his life, but that he does, he needs someone who respects him for who he is, and he he finds that his family and all of his exes have always kind of, you know, tried to like fix him to be more of a people person or really be out there, you know, pushing his career and marketing his books. And that's just not who he is, and he has no interest in that. And this woman, this love interest, is really a great fit for him, even though she's more extroverted. She's, you know, she had the idea to drag him along as a fake boyfriend, you know, but they really balance each other, and yeah, I was really rooting for this couple. Okay, the next book I read is, I actually have copies of all of the rest of the books, which that's not usually the case. So The Best American Food Writing 2019 by Samin Nosrat. She is the editor. It's a collection of food writing. So every year my dad buys me a different collection of food writing, and this stems back to when I was doing more cooking professionally and reading more food writing. But I don't really read in that genre throughout the year anymore, but I always do enjoy kind of getting a tour of what's out there at the end of every year. And so I have a funny story about this one. So I took it on a plane ride with me, and I mean, the second that I pulled the book out, the woman who was sitting next to me, she was an older woman, she pulled off her headphones and immediately engaged me in this long conversation with the book, wanted to know all about it. She's telling me about how she's going to visit her son, who is a fan of Samin Nosrat, who, if you don't know her, she's the author of the cookbook Salt, Sweet, Acid, Heat. Did I get those in the right order? And she's also the host of a very popular Netflix series with the same name. I have seen the series, haven't cooked from the cookbook. Literally before we took off, we're still sitting there on the tarmac. She pulls out her phone and goes on Amazon and orders the book and has it shipped to her son. She's like, it should arrive on Sunday. and she also was able to pull up her library app for her local library and like place a hold for this book for herself in her local library. So that escalated quickly. This was definitely the fastest that any stranger has ever like followed through on a book recommendation that I have given them. So I hope that she and her son enjoy it. I kind of had some mixed feelings about it. As with any anthology, there were some stories that stood out more than others. So one of my favorites was by Marilyn Noble, called Bison Bars. We're supposed to restore native communities and grass-based ranches. Then came Epic Provisions. And then the very next one as well, which is called Big in Japan by Tejal Rao. And this is about Japanese Kit Kats. So you probably know that in Japan they have a million different wacky flavors of Kit Kats, and that they're a really popular gift to bring back. If you've ever known anyone who travels to Japan, they may have brought you back some Kit Kats. And this was just a deeper look into sort of why that is. Like, how did those products and marketing and culture come around? Like, how are they actually made in the factory? It's very descriptive, and just, they really have a turn of phrase. So maybe I will look up that author and see if they've written anything longer that I could pick up. The pacing in it was a little off for me. Is there such thing as pacing in an anthology? I've never experienced this before where, well, there's one really awesome piece that's just basically one page. That's the first story. And then the second story is like 48 pages or something, you know? It's like this much of the book. And then the rest of them are more like 2 to 5 pages. So it was just very strange to start off with something that was, I mean, I didn't even finish the first story on that plane ride. Okay, so now I have 4 middle grade graphic novels to talk about. The first book I read is Queen of the Sea by Dylan McConis. And this one I saw coming up on a lot of best of the year lists. And it is really chunky for a middle grade book, but it's a real romp. So it follows Margaret, who has never left her little island, and it's just a speck here somewhere. It's all based on true English history, but the author has really adapted it into her own world. So you see here it's the kingdom of Albion rather than England, and the sisters, all of the nuns that she's growing up with, They are praying to, the sorrowful son and the mournful mother, that kind of thing. So it has this really immersive manner of storytelling, and there's the great natural detail, and sometimes it almost looks like a medieval manuscript. Really cool, creative entry into the graphic novel world by Dylan McConis. Nadia, friend of the channel, has also read her webcomic and kickstarted her webcomic that's about like vampires in the French Revolution or something. Okay, next up I want to talk about Catherine's War by Julia Billet and Claire Favel. It is translated from the French, and I read this as an ARC. The book itself was published on January 20th, and oh boy, how do I talk about this book? Well, if you have seen some of my other videos, you might have heard me mention that as a child, Holocaust fiction and Holocaust memoir was a real obsession of mine, and I just read my way through that genre and really overdosed on it. And I now do not know how to have an objective opinion about this genre whatsoever. So this one for me really offers a different look, a fresh take, and was just a stunning use of the graphic novel medium itself, which didn't really exist when I was a kid and reading through this genre. So this is the story of, her name is really Rachel, but she has to change her name to Catherine because she's in hiding during the war. It is based on the real story of the real experiences of the author's mother during World War II, and it has been fictionalized. So she's already living in the first place where she takes refuge, which is this really cool, like, experimental school, and they just give the children so much agency to learn whatever they're interested in, to work together, to be teachers and leaders themselves. And that experience really just gives her the skills to survive and thrive. And that, just as an educator, that was just an amazing aspect of the story that I didn't know I was getting into when I picked it up. So you see she has this really cool camera called the Rolleiflex. This is really her sort of magic tool that she carries around with her through a whole bunch of different places where she has to keep moving and be in hiding. And she takes pictures the whole time. And there are, in the back of the book, there are some actual real photos. This is such an emotional story, but it's not even dark or depressing. So I really need some of your fresh eyes on this book. Please pick this up and read it. Was it as meaningful to you as it is to me? Okay, last up we have Lafayette, and this is part of Nathan Hale's Hazardous Tales series. This is a non-fiction graphic novel series, and I've seen it around for a while and finally picked it up. Some of my students are currently studying the American Revolutionary War period, so I thought I would give it a try. As a Hamilton fan, this was really cool. It really expands on the historic person of Lafayette, who I didn't even remember that that's not, his real name. He's the Marquis de Lafayette. It's an aristocratic title. And let's see if I can find when he shares his full name. It's very silly. Marie Joseph Paul Yves Roche Gilbert de Motier, the Marquis de Lafayette. I was baptized like a Spaniard with the names of every saint who might offer me protection in battle. And they call him Gilbert. I don't speak French. I was a little skeptical of just being able to parse all the characters. It's a bunch of white dudes in uniforms and it's not rendered in full color. But yeah, they really do a lot to make it come alive. And it's very immersive. I got super caught up in the adventure. There is some inclusion of African Americans and women and Native Americans. It's very funny. I laughed out loud a lot while reading this. So I would recommend it to my students, and I'll probably pick up another one in the series. Hello, I was editing my January wrap up and somehow there was no footage of me talking about one of the graphic novels that I read, which is Midwinter Witch, the third book in the Witch Boy series. So I have the first book here in my library. I don't have the third book. I'm going to put this away so I can put the picture of the actual book that I read. So I know you've heard me, I'm sure you've heard other people on BookTube talk about how this is an amazing book series by Molly Knox Ostertag, and it's got a great gender non-conforming character, Aster, and he is a witch in a family where it's traditional that women are witches and the boys are shapeshifters. And in this story, there is a magical competition, and he's really excited to compete to be crowned the Midwinter Witch. In this story, we see his mom kind of be concerned that he's basically putting himself out there so publicly as a male witch. It really extends this metaphor of, how to navigate within your family and in public spaces when you're gender nonconforming. And of course, in the end, his family and his community comes through and is supportive of him. This was not my most favorite of the series, and that's because it was really set fully in the magical world. Aster has this non-magical friend, Charlie, and she's sort of invited along on this adventure. In the first two books, we kind of got to spend a little more time in Charlie's world, and she goes to non-magical school in the local town, and it kind of balanced the plot between realism and magic. And so just personally for me, this was not my favorite, but if you're a big fantasy fan, I think you'll love this book and you're going to be captivated by it. I also would add that this book gets a little more textual with queerness, where we see, one of the characters has two dads and they're like going on a romantic getaway in the background. And there is a same-sex crush between a couple of the young people. So I'm just loving where this series is going, and I look forward to reading more from Molly Knox Ostertag, and my students love it too and can't wait for more. So yeah, I only read 7 books in January. It's not traditionally a very busy reading month for me. I'm usually kind of taking it easy during that month, and then I definitely anticipate reading more in February. I'm going to have a TBR up for Blackathon, and I'm going to also have a TBR for the Black Love Readathon. So I anticipate reading more in February. Thanks for watching. I'd love to know, how was the start to your reading year? Have you read anything good yet? Please let me know down below. Of course, you can also hit me up, subscribe, all that good stuff, and we'll see you in the next video.